Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Spooky Chicks and Horror Flicks. We are your hosts, Emma.
And I'm Allie.
And for those of you also that don't know us, we are two best friends who love to talk about our favorite horror movies and drink wine and or White Claw in the process. And if you'd like to find us on social, we have a TikTok and Instagram, and you can find us at Spooky Chicks and Horror Flicks. We also have a Patreon if you guys are interested in supporting the podcast. So we have several different levels that you can choose from, and we've got a lot of really awesome benefits like access to our show notes. You can get some behind the scenes content. We are also going to be starting up our book club as well. So if you are a book whore like I am, please get on there and join the fun. Allie, what are we reviewing today?
Today, we're reviewing the 1976 The Omen. Not to be confused with the Julia Stiles version. I don't know when that came out, but the original The Omen. And quick spoiler alert, we spoil the shit out of everything. So if you haven't seen this and you want to watch it, go watch it on Hulu and then come back to this episode. But if you don't give a fuck, come enjoy this ride with us. And speaking of creepy children, Emma, what have you been up to?
Are you saying I'm a creepy child?
No, maybe we all are.
Yes, sometimes. I have just been same old, same old. Did just have an amazing trip with Allie and the producer up in Lake Arrowhead. And we haven't released the fun stuff that we did up there just yet, but that will be coming very soon. And we're very excited to show you all. But yeah, that was a really, really fun weekend. And I feel like I just needed to get out into nature. Allie, how about you?
Same. I had a great time up there with you both, and it was amazing. Can't wait to release that content. And this past week, I actually went to go see my favorite band at a new music venue in San Diego called The Shell, and it's awesome. It's on the water, and the band was Lord Huron. They didn't play my favorite song, and that's okay. The one I walked down the aisle to, but that's fine.
That's okay.
I don't take it personally, but no, it was amazing.
They're so good.
Speaking of amazing, what are you drinking?
Today, I am dabbling in a pineapple twisted tea.
Pineapple?
Yep. And I know it's random, but it was on sale at 7-Eleven, and I thought, why not give it a shot?
And how is that?
It's actually pretty damn good. And I'm also dabbling in a glass of Trojan horse Pinot Grigio, also from 7-Eleven. Can you tell I like 7-Eleven?
If you don't have a gas station that you love, then who are you?
It's very true.
Yes.
Allie, what are you drinking?
I, of course, always have 3 beverages. Number 1, White Claw.
What flavor?
What the fuck do you think it is?
Oh, I was going to say, have you dove into the new flavors that I bought you? They were out of black cherry at 7-Eleven, so I had to get her some watermelon.
That's my backup.
I was going to say, that's your backup choice.
Yes. I do have a black cherry, but Emma lovingly got me some watermelon. So I've got water, black cherry White Claw, and a Capri Sun.
Oh, girl. Capri Sun. Damn, I love Capri Sun.
Childhood, you know?
Wow. Love it. Taking it back.
Taking it back. And in honor of that, let's cheers to this fucking episode.
Cheers to episode, I think it's 22. Oh my gosh. Cheers. Okay, so getting into some of the... Sorry, I'm laughing because Allie's having a bad acid reflux day, and we've named her acid reflux Damien. So apologies if you hear him in the podcast.
You'll hear him.
Oh, man. But getting into the synopsis of the film, mysterious deaths surround an American ambassador. Could the child that he is raising actually be the Antichrist, the devil's own son? A lot of questions in that synopsis.
That's extremely vague. But okay, yeah.
But I kind of like it. For someone that has no clue what this film is, then you're in for a wild ride.
It makes you either not want to watch it or want to watch it.
That's very true. This film was actually directed by Richard Donner, and he is a very famous director in Hollywood, known for busting out a lot of blockbusters, including The Goonies, Superman, Scrooged, Lethal Weapon. I mean, this man definitely has a very great portfolio. And then he also had a writer, David Seltzer. And David is actually most known for all the work that he's done on The Omen and just on all of the subsequent films and variations of The Omen that have come kind of afterwards. So his docket really is like Omen filled, if you know what I mean.
His last name is Seltzer.
I knew you were going to say something.
I love him already.
Like, Kevin, can you change your last name to Seltzer so that can be Allie's last name?
Allie Seltzer. I'm in. Just kidding. I love my last name.
I love it. And then this film is also, for the most part, filmed in the UK and in Italy. So you'll definitely see a lot of that throughout the film if you're watching it. And then, just like Ali kind of mentioned at the top of the episode, you can watch this on Hulu as of May of 2024. And then getting into our ratings for the film. So on IMDb, this film has a 7.5 out of 10. Ali, you want to tell us what Rotten Tomatoes has?
Ugh, I guess. I say that because I don't agree with these scores, but the tomato meter says 85% and the audience score is 81. And to me, that's too high.
You didn't really enjoy this one, did you?
Well, I'll get into that.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
And then getting into some of our top billed cast, starting things off, we have Mr. Gregory Peck, who plays Robert Thorne. And I only knew him personally from To Kill a Mockingbird, but the producer said that he absolutely loves him.
Yeah, I was talking to my mom about this today. She said that Gregory Peck was the heartthrob of this film's generation and the generation before. So, and I did look up some old pictures of when he was younger. I was like, yeah, I would. I'd do it.
Wait, I want to look him up now. Oh my gosh.
Also him in this movie. I'm like, okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the next top billed cast for us is Lee Remick, and she plays Catherine Thorne, who is Robert's wife. And I don't know much about her, but I was looking at her IMDb, and she was in a movie called The Farmer's Daughter. And if you're not familiar, we covered the movie X a couple episodes ago, and they film a dirty film. And it's called The Farmer's Daughter. I was like, wow, full circle, you know?
Wait, that's actually really funny. But I'm assuming hers was not a naughty film.
I am assuming that as well.
Okay.
And then again, Mom, thank you for all of this information. She told me that Lee Remick was also in a very, very famous film called Days of Wine and Roses. And she won an Oscar for that. And she told me the synopsis, and I don't know if I want to watch it.
We'll save that for maybe another time.
Another time.
Yeah. And then we have little Harvey Stevens, who plays Damien, and he actually does not have a very large film repertoire, but one really cool thing that I noted, he actually plays a tabloid reporter in the 2006 remake of The Omen. So I love that they kind of put him in there slyly.
The Julia Stiles one.
Yes, the Julia Stiles one.
And I thought it was kind of interesting that we don't see him a lot in this film, even though he's the conduit of chaos.
Yeah, and one thing I noted too is that he doesn't speak a whole lot too. We do hear his voice here and there, but you kind of hear it you're not actually looking at his lips moving in a lot of the times where he has actual dialogue happening.
He didn't have to learn that many lines. Good for him.
Yeah.
Our next dude is David Warner, and he plays Jennings. And I was like, okay, I recognize this person. What do I recognize him from? Oh my gosh, he's in Titanic. And
my God. I totally was like, what do I recognize him from? But I didn't take the time to look at all of his filmography.
No, I was like, I have to know.
Wait, he's the guy that puts the
necklace in Jack's pocket. So he
oh my God.
What if he never did that?
He's the catalyst of the whole film.
He fucking killed Jack, basically. A plus B equals he killed Jack.
1000%.
Cool.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And then we have Billy. I think Ali wrote in our combined notes, Billy Whiteclaw. And her name is actually Billy Whitelaw.
I did that literally on accident, but I'm like, wasn't an accident.
And she plays Mrs. Baylock, which is the nanny later on in the film that comes into play, who is essentially a protector of Damien, and she evil as shit.
She was also in fucking Hot Fuzz, which is so random.
That is literally so random. Well, and I actually read her character was actually written to be a very warm, kind of effusive Irish nanny. And she significantly changed the dialogue in her audition. And she created this very cold and slightly sinister character. And this is sort of what they used to really craft her character for the film.
I hope she got a raise because damn, she sold it.
Right? So before we get into some of our fun facts today for the film, I do want to preface that we have a few that are a little on the long side, but we definitely wanted to keep them in here because they're super, super interesting. And something else to note is that some of these are a little bit more alleged facts. So definitely if you want to learn a little bit more about them, do your own research. And check out the validity of some of these. But diving right in, one of my favorites that my dad actually told me when I told him we were reviewing this is that Sam Neill, our favorite man from The Possession a couple episodes ago, he actually played Damien as an adult in the third installment of The Omen called The Final Conflict in 1981. I thought that was so cool. And if you see the cover with Sam Neill on it, he does a great job looking like an adult Damien.
Hot.
Ew. But anyways, moving on.
The song Ave Satani, that is their main score that you hear throughout the film. It remains the only Best Original Song Oscar nominee for horror films and the only nominee that was written and sung in Latin. And the song title, Ave Satani, means Hail Satan. And I'm like, LOL, I'm good.
I'm like, can I play that at my wedding? No, I'm totally joking. Totally joking. And another fun fact is that Richard Donner, one of his first requests to screenwriter David Seltzer was to actually remove all suggestions of any of the supernatural, such as apparitions of cloven hoof demons or devil entities or witches' covens, anything like that. The golden rule was that nothing was allowed in the script that couldn't actually happen in real life, because the idea was that they wanted some degree of doubt over if these deaths maybe were just accidental or if they were actually caused by an evil force. They really wanted the audience to kind of have that internal struggle and thought process. And this technique of quote unquote death by rare accident was actually applied in several contemporary horror movies, such as in The Awakening in 1980, and eventually as the basis of the later horror film franchise Final Destination and all of its sequels, which I thought was super cool.
I reference Final Destination so much in this whole film, so I'm really sorry.
Yeah, the producer and I were talking about that a lot when we were watching it. We kept thinking like, this is giving Final Destination vibes.
100%. I say that a lot, so apologize in advance, except for I'm not sorry because I don't have to be. The next fact is Emma and I are marketing girlies, so we found this pretty interesting. And part of their pre-release marketing campaign, they really wanted to emphasize the 3 sixes, 666, as the sign of Satan. And the movie was sneak previewed nationwide on June 6th. And while audiences inside the theaters were being scared by the film, theater employees were out front. They put up posters saying, today is the 6th day of the 6th month of 1976. I mean, brilliant, but like fuck right off because that scares me.
I almost wish that I was someone in the 70s and 80s back when films were coming out like that, because I even think back at my dad saying that when he saw The Exorcist in theaters or when he saw Jaws, like people literally running out of the theaters and screaming because previews just weren't like how they are now, where they kind of just give up like almost the entire film. And it was just so much more of an experience, and everyone there just added to like the whole atmosphere. So I bet that was so cool
100%.
seeing it.
And like my mom said this movie scared her more than The Exorcist because it's like more realistic.
And that is exactly what Richard Donner was trying to do. So he would have got you. And this film also kind of seemed to fall victim to a sinister curse. So Gregory Peck and screenwriter David Seltzer, during like the filming, I believe, of this, they actually took separate planes to the UK, and both planes were actually struck by lightning. And there was also a couple other instances where some of the Rottweilers that were used in the film actually attacked their trainers out of nowhere. There was also a hotel where director Richard Donner was staying that actually got bombed by the IRA. And he was also struck by a car at some point in all of the filming process. And after Gregory Peck canceled yet another flight to Israel, the plane that he would have gotten on, he found out later actually crashed, killing everybody on board. And then the jinx also kind of appeared to persist a lot into post-production as well. And they even saw like special effects artist John Richardson. He was injured later on, and his girlfriend was actually beheaded in an accident on the set of A Bridge Too Far in 1977.
Which will be extremely sadly ironic as we get into this film.
So again, all of that is alleged, but this also sort of reminds me of all of the shit that happened on the Poltergeist set, which if you haven't listened to that episode, that's actually our very, very first episode. And we touch on a lot of those instances too as well. And then lastly, every death in the movie is shown avoiding bloodshed, but exposed in a very explicit way to create and increase a horror and evil atmosphere kind of as the script goes on. So these deaths include some hangings, impaling, falling from a high floor of a building, stabbing, and then decapitation. again, it's just kind of like a lot of these like rare accidents that they're really honing on in the film. And it's really just supposed to kind of up the ante of just horror of going about your everyday life and having these kind of freak accidents happen to you. So getting into the film here, the film starts with Robert in a car driving at night through Rome on 6/6. And we hear a man kind of in the background as he's driving saying, "The child is dead." And Robert then arrives at like a monastery kind of place, but I think it actually is a hospital, but it's like a classic kind of Roman hospital where they have nuns and like the whole 9 yards. And he talks to a priest while he's there about how his wife has wanted a baby for so long.
Okay, we get it. Like, pretty sure I can deduce that your child that your wife just had has died upon birth. But like, does she know? And why'd you just go straight to a monastery or hospital to like procure a child? What are you going to tell her? I have so many questions.
Yeah, it's very weird and confusing kind of right out of the gate. Like you're like, did the baby die? Is she okay? There's a lot of confusion.
Totally.
And then the priest actually suggests that he could potentially adopt a child and then offers Damien as a solution, essentially.
Yeah, the priest is like, hey, this fucking kid looks kind of like you guys, so she won't fucking know. The priest also says the mother of Damien, or whatever he's named at birth, also died while giving childbirth. Okay, fucking suspicious.
And now they're just going to give that baby to Robert and his wife and just act like everything is hunky-dory.
I feel like ideally we would just get Buddy the Elf, like how he's adopted. Let's go with that instead of this.
This would be a very different film,
Very.
I think. And so desperate to make his wife happy, Robert is like, I need to hide this death of my actual son because it would like actually break my wife's heart. And he agrees to take the child. And the priest says to him, on this night, God has given you a son. And Robert ends up getting the baby from the priest and brings the baby to his wife at her bedside after she has given birth to, quote unquote, this now new baby that she thinks.
Don't you think you would know, like the oxytocin between a baby and a mom, skin to skin? Don't you think you would know? I don't know.
She probably has doubts, I'm assuming, but like is maybe just erring on the side of hoping that this is actually all real and that everything's fine and that this is her baby.
This is where her delulu starts.
This is where the delulu starts and this is where the avoidance starts.
Oh,
she needs to go to therapy.
There's a lot of avoidance on most sides here.
Right?
How is it that easy to adopt a kid? So like he was probably there for like 20 minutes and he's like, here you go. Here's a baby.
Was there paperwork involved? I mean, I feel like we just have so many questions about the process right out of the gate.
It's the 70s, you know?
Yeah, I guess
life is groovy.
Life is groovy. It was just a different time back then. Well, and then a while later, we kind of go immediately into his like toddler phase and we see Robert coming home from work and they're still living in Italy, presumably. And he tells Catherine and little Damien that they need to pack because they are going to be moving to London and he is going to be the new American ambassador to Great Britain.
Oh, so this is where we learn that he's like a boss ass bitch. Good for him, daddy.
Like, yeah, he is like, oh God.
Sorry.
No. He's got political influence, okay? And that is going to come into play later in the film.
It sure will, but he's also a daddy, so.
He is actually a father.
Technically.
Yes, he is,
Yes.
Allie. And as they get kind of settled into their new home, Catherine and Robert take a walk around the house and they're just kind of like checking everything out. They don't really have a lot of furniture or anything yet.
This is not a fucking house, Emma. This is a fucking castle.
I wonder if he gets just like nicer living quarters because he's an ambassador.
They must either pay well or he's inherited money or I don't know, but I'm like, sign me up, boo. Damien who? I'll be the nanny. Oh God. And then Catherine, the wife, mentions that this place is like a suitable place for a future Mr. President of the United States. And I'm like, okay, so that maybe that's his goal is what he wants to do.
Yeah, he's climbing the political ladder.
Yes. And they all seem so excited and happy. And I'm like, oh, enjoy that for now.
Yeah, it's actually quite cute in the very beginning parts of this movie. Like you're like, oh, it's actually like a cute little family. And we have a few actually great scenes of them. It's almost like a montage of them all interacting. So Catherine, Robert, and little Damien, they're like outside enjoying like nature, going on walks together, kind of all of this stuff. And it's really setting up this really nice family dynamic.
It's extremely precious, but I'm like, aren't you very important as an American ambassador and shouldn't you be working more? Question mark.
Allie's just right down to the details.
I told
She's
you guys, like,
you need to be working,
yeah.
sir. Well, and as Catherine and Robert are talking about Robert's trip that he needs to be taking to the US soon, they kind of momentarily lose Damien for a hot sec, and they think that he might have fallen into the river only to find him kind of perfectly fine. And that's like the first moment of like that we have as viewers in the film.
Something kind of important during their conversation during this rendezvous is Robert used to be college roommates with the acting president of the United States.
Oh, yes. I totally remember that.
Yes,
totally.
So that's kind of important. But yes, they kind of lose him and then they like look back. I'm also like, how are you just like strolling hand in hand and not fucking watching your toddler?
By a river.
By a fucking river. And it had like rapids, low-key.
100%. So we've kind of skipped ahead now, and Damien is now like a couple years older, maybe around 5, I would say, 4 or 5. He is having his big birthday party, and it's huge. And it seems like everyone is just like having a blast at this huge party. And it totally reminded me of you, Allie, because Allie is actually quite the party planner in her, she does events marketing, first of all, for a job. And then also on the side, she also knows how to plan a good party. And I'm like, Allie's going to see this and think this is quite the shindig.
Well, my thoughts actually were, what the fuck is this party? Who does this? I mean, I would if somebody paid me to.
Yeah.
But it looks like fucking Disneyland in their on the lawn of their castle. Something to note, we also see our character Jennings for the first time here. He's got his camera. He's just kind of lurking around taking pictures. And I'm like, well, who's this dude and why is he taking pictures?
Also, did anyone else notice these scary fucking clowns? Because I don't know if y'all have looked at what clowns looked like in like the 60s and 70s, but these clowns are terrifying.
I clocked that and I was like, why the fuck wouldn't a 5-year-old be crying?
Totally just terrified.
That could be
God, terrified, terrifier, clown. Oh my God.
There you go. Good tie back.
Anyways, so then moving on, Catherine, the mom, she gets like a little jealous for a hot second at one of the photographers taking photos of Damien with his nanny.
I was thinking, like, wouldn't you get jealous too on like more of a like, okay, she's like a hot young thing and taking photos? Yeah.
Well, so me and the producer talked about this when we watched the film, and we said that because he asked, he's like, I think it's kind of weird. Like, why is she having an issue? But I think that sometimes mothers have guilt when they have a nanny, and they sometimes can have guilt that they are not bonding or spending as much quality time with their child. And so maybe seeing like a nanny having a great time with their child maybe just like kind of initiates a little bit of a twinge of jealousy. That's just at least my interpretation.
No, I fully get that, because like when I see somebody having a great time with my cat, I'm like, that should be me. Anyways, bro, you also hired this nanny for a reason, and she's just like doing her fucking job.
Do you want her to be mean to your child? And as the nanny kind of walks away, because Catherine sort of interrupts and is like, I can take him, she actually notices like a Rottweiler dog at one of the trees sort of in the distance.
They are having some fucking intense eye contact, and I'm like, you're either imprinting or some shit, or your shit's gonna go down. How did nobody else notice that sus-ass large dog at this children's birthday party?
I totally agree. He must have just hid kind of well enough in the distance to where nobody really noticed.
He was like, I got my target.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking it up, and allegedly, hellhound is the unofficial name for large black dogs in which serve Satan or the anarchist.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, that's kind of crazy.
So they've made that, they're imprinting or some shit's going down. And we see Damien on the carousel, and we don't see the nanny, but we hear her in the background, and she's shouting, Damien, Damien, look over here. I love you. It's all for you. And everybody starts to look towards that voice, and we see her on top of the ledge of their castle mansion shit with a big smile on her face and a rope around her neck. She proceeds to jump and unalive herself. Also, how the fuck did she get up to that top of that house on that ledge so fast and figure out the logistics of this entire situation? But R.I.P. nanny. So all of the kids are staring. Some are like crying. Some are just like, whoa. And Jennings also is taking a bunch of fucking pictures of the situation. I'm like, that's kind of inappropriate, right?
But definitely is helpful later.
Yes. But in the current moment, rude.
Correct.
Yes.
Very true.
And as this is happening, Catherine is holding Damien in her arms, trying to shield him from what's like happening. And he spots the Rottweiler and they lock eyes and is like, what up, boo? Like, we gonna be friends?
I feel like this is like the very first time where we start to experience that, like, oh, is this a coincidence, or was this maybe like meant to happen because of some sort of evil force? And so it's very eerie, kind of, because you do see that look between Damien and the Rottweiler. And doesn't he kind of smirk at him a little bit too? Like, kind of like
that little fucking smirk.
Yeah, it's creepy. And then the next day on his way to work, Robert is actually getting questioned by some of the reporters regarding the nanny's unaliving. And he actually runs into one of the photographers from Damien's birthday party, Jennings, and accidentally kind of hits his camera out of his hands and damages it. And Robert is like, I'm really sorry, I'll pay for the camera. And the photographer, he says, let's just say that you owe me one.
I'm also like, how does Jennings always know where the fuck Robert is?
I feel like Jennings definitely was keeping tabs on him. And this would have been nice to have a prequel to find out a little bit more about Jennings. Like, how did he get hired for this birthday party? How was he involved? How did he even just become enthralled with everything going on in Robert's life? Very interesting.
Jennings' prequel is the Titanic.
Yeah, this is his job after he survives.
Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. There you go. So watch the Titanic first and then watch this, I guess, is what we're saying.
He didn't survive that. This is his second life. You heard it here first. Yeah.
You heard it here first. So then later, as Robert is kind of getting into his office and getting comfortable and everything, he actually gets a visit from a priest, and he is telling Robert kind of some random gibberish that really doesn't make sense. And Robert is very confused as to like what this conversation is, where it's going, and kind of like why that man is even here. And he tells Robert he must accept Christ as his savior now. And he needs to take communion at church. He needs to drink the blood of Christ. And he says this is the only way that you can defeat the son of the devil.
And he says he has killed once and he will kill again.
And we find out that his name is Father Brennan. And he tells Robert that he's in danger and that he was actually at the hospital the night that his son was born and that he witnessed the birth.
Yeah. And Father Brennan was like, I saw its mother. And Robert was like, yeah, word, that was my wife. That was the person that gave birth. And Father is like, no, bitch, I saw its mother.
And then this part really irked me when I saw it. He starts to say, I saw his mother. His mother was a jack. And then at that moment is when the security actually comes in and grabs him.
Oh my God,
and takes him away. I
didn't even catch that.
So if you guys put together some context clues, I think he's trying to say that the mother was a jackal. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into this a little bit later, so I'm not going to go too into details, but just think about that. And as the priest gets escorted out by security out of Robert's building, Jennings, again, the photographer, we see him snap a photo of the priest. And later on, as Jennings is developing it, he notices that there is an interesting line going through kind of all photos of the priest and at like sort of a diagonal angle.
And he's smoking in this dark room where he's developing his film. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's extremely dangerous with all the chemicals in there.
It's the 70s, man.
70s. Dude, anything fucking flew in the 70s, I guess.
It really did.
Especially like that feathered hair.
Oh, God. And then later that day at home, a new nanny actually ends up just showing up. And her name is Mrs. Baylock. And as Robert and Catherine are at home, Miss Baylock kind of just shows up out of nowhere and they're a little bit confused. And after they send her off to go and meet Damien alone, by the way, because she makes it adamant that she needs to meet the child alone so that there's no like outside pressure, they quickly to themselves are kind of questioning, where did she come from?
They were both like, did you hire her? Wait, no, I didn't. Did you hire her?
Exactly. And then they quickly like kind of run to catch up with her to go and question her. And she gives them her references and they kind of seemingly just like leave the situation alone and say that they're going to call the agency later and just kind of make sure that everything is all like status quo. And then they just like let her carry on.
So fucking sketch. Have you not heard of nanny.com?
Is that a real website?
Yeah.
Is that a dumb question? Oh.
No, it is. Yeah.
Then Mrs. Baylock goes to meet Damien. And she has a very sinister look on her face as she kind of gives him a smirk. And she immediately tells him, I am here to protect thee. And then he smiles back at her. Like they already immediately kind of have this like telekinetic connection almost.
That fucking smirk.
Fucking smirk. So later on, when Catherine tells Mrs. Baylock to get Damien ready to go with them to church, I think they're actually going to a wedding at this specific church. Mrs. Baylock is a little resistant and tries to say that Damien would rather go to a park. And she kind of has this moment, it's a little bit intense with Catherine and Mrs. Baylock, where Catherine's like, no, I want him to come with us to church. Like, please go and get him ready. And Mrs. Baylock was still trying to kind of fight back a little bit. Obviously, Mother Catherine has the final say, and they decide to take him anyway.
If a nanny spoke back to you like that, isn't that like immediate firing situation?
I think Mrs. Baylock has several of these situations right throughout the film, and I think she always tries to play it off. Like, she tries to come in hard first, saying, I think he would rather do this. And then Catherine will say, well, no, blah, blah, blah. And then Mrs. Baylock kind of stands down a little bit and is like, well, I just think he would enjoy it more or whatever. So I feel like there's this like give and take where she's trying not to be too like overpowering. But I totally agree with you. If a nanny was giving me that attitude, I would communicate and tell them right then and there, hey, thank you for the suggestion, but this is my child and what I say goes. And I'd appreciate if you follow suit.
If they're insisting on him going to church, it seems like he's probably been to church before. They want him to go to church. So like, what the fuck's the problem now?
Yeah, because I think Mrs. Baylock says like, a child that young is not going to understand what goes on at church. And they're just like, bro, he's coming to a wedding. Like, chill.
I see like tiny babies in churches.
All the time. I was a tiny baby in church.
There you go.
There you go. And then in the car on the way to church, Damien seems super frightened and ends up basically having a full-on tantrum in the car as they're getting close to the entrance of the church. And this actually causes like the entire family to leave, as Damien is having such a bad tantrum that when one of the chauffeur or like valet people kind of opens the door to let them out, they have to quickly close it and then keep driving because Damien is making such a scene. And he ends up basically beating the shit out of his mom, Catherine.
Heavy side note though. Heavy. Catherine's outfit for this wedding is high-key fire.
So fucking fire.
I'm like, where do I get this? It's like a powder blue dress suit with one of those like wicked old school hair wraps. And she's got some like great makeup. I'm like, girl,
Stunning. We love it. And then after they get back from the church, Catherine and Robert are having a little bit of a talk about kind of what transpired and maybe potentially taking Damien to a doctor. And it's kind of funny because they sort of talk about how they've actually never taken Damien to a doctor ever because they just believe that they've never had to. And even Robert is kind of like, well, isn't it kind of weird that like he hasn't gotten an ear infection or a cold or like there just hasn't been any reason for us to take him? Like maybe we should take him and just see if he's all good. And Catherine seems super convinced that he just doesn't need to see one.
Catherine, are you fucking Delulu? Everybody gets sick.
And children especially.
It's children especially. And like, also the kid just tried to beat your fucking ass and he doesn't speak. And I'm like, Robert, trust your intuition. Just fucking take Damien and go to the doctor.
And of course, Catherine's like, he's a perfectly healthy little boy.
Totally. He seems so healthy.
And then later that evening, Robert actually finds the Rottweiler outside of Damien's room, basically guarding him. And it's really spooky because he's like coming up kind of to Damien's room. And then all of a sudden there's a freaking Rottweiler right there.
And he's like, what the actual fuck? The Rottweiler is growling at him. And Miss Baylock comes out and she's like, bro, chill. He's cool.
And Mrs. Baylock says that they found the Rottie outside and that they should keep him for protection, especially because he's going to have a lot of long trips away. Robert, that is.
That's so not normal. And I love dogs, but like after everything that's happening in this house, like, no, bro. And Robert understands that. And he's like, bitch, if I want a watchdog, I will find one myself. And I was reading that allegedly, kind of a cute little fact, is one of the biggest problems with shooting Mrs. Baylock's hellhound or ominous dog is it was nothing like the creature it was supposed to be portraying. He just wanted to lick and play and like do all the cute shit. And I'm like, oh.
I know, me and the producer read about that earlier. We were like, oh, he like was the opposite of evil and he just wanted to be a lovey boy.
He deserves an Oscar.
He does. He did great acting. And I do actually love this part though, because Robert tells her that the dog needs to be taken away in the morning. And I am not a proponent of taking dogs to a shelter or whatever, but like I love that he actually fought back against something he did not want and was like, you know what, Mrs. Baylock, this dog is gone in the morning. Like, we're not having it.
Yeah, she's like, I don't give a fuck how much Damien likes him. Get rid of him, bitch.
So then later we see that Catherine and Damien are having a little date together, and Catherine decides to take Damien to this like cute little zoo.
Well, this is actually the cutest fucking zoo I've ever seen. And we also fucking finally hear Damien say, thank you, and being all cute while he's getting some ice cream or shit.
And as they're at the zoo together, we start to notice kind of several weird things happening with the animals. And you can just tell Damien's presence at the zoo is really having a reaction on the animals. And even like one of the first things that they look at is the giraffes. And they're looking at the giraffes. Damien starts staring at them. And then literally the entire pack of giraffes runs away as he's staring at them.
And I know for a fact, for my one time at the zoo when I fed a giraffe, that they're extremely friendly.
And animals at zoos are used to people watching them, and they are not usually very shy because they're very used to human interaction, or at least seeing like humans look at them.
Totally.
Right?
So as a mom, wouldn't you be like, this is fucking weird?
Yeah, that's like sign 1 million that things are weird with Damien.
Totally.
And then kind of on the side too, we get another scene where Robert is leaving the house. And as he's leaving his like castle house, as Ali likes to call it, we actually see Father Brennan at the gates to kind of hit the property. And he's sort of just standing by.
And Robert clocks that. And I'm like, broski, he's trying to talk to you. Take a hint. Like, also, all cool. You're probably actually working now and working for like that castle you need to pay off. So
Finally. And then back at the zoo, we see that Catherine is now driving her and Damien through this like baboon exhibit, which you are apparently allowed to drive through at the zoo. And it starts out really kind of fine. The baboons are definitely active and they're interacting a little bit with the car. And then things go fucking berserk. And the baboons fully attack Catherine's car with her and Damien in it. And this scene really got to me because these are all real baboons that are actually kind of attacking the car for the sake of this scene.
Are they?
Yes. Oh my God, 100%. So one fact I wanted to bring up about this, and again, this is alleged, but apparently the zookeeper at the Zoofari where the scene took place with the baboons, giraffes, and the other animals while they went crazy was actually killed. We don't know exactly when, but the animals evidently went berserk during this like baboon attack scene. And when he tried to intervene, he was unfortunately killed in the process by the zoo animals. And this is actually one of the incidents that director Richard Donner and other people associated with the production point to have evidence as to like kind of why they think that there is this like omen curse to the film. So after the zoo incident, Catherine and Robert are talking later at their home about everything that kind of transpired and if everything's okay. And Robert asks her, you would tell me if anything was wrong with our child, right? Which is so sad.
So sad. But her response is wild. She's like, what could be wrong? We're beautiful people, aren't we? I wish I was that Delulu, but
The confidence.
Yes, you're Delulu, but he's also been withholding the biggest secret of your life for 5 years. And I'm like, insert shrug emoji. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and then she actually tells him that she believes that she might need to see a psychiatrist because she has quote unquote fears.
Girl, he also has been trying to get you help. So just accept that help. And I can't take this back and forth. It's giving me fucking whiplash. Back and forth. I'm like, you guys, toxic.
Yeah. It's wild.
It's toxic is what it is.
Well, and Robert does agree to find her a doctor. He's like, let's do it, honey. And I actually love that. And I wrote in all caps, we love to see the support from a man like that, especially
Yes.
back in the 70s, being
Totally.
like, all of your feelings are valid. Let's like get you to a doctor. Like, I love that.
Not just like get back in the kitchen, bitch.
Exactly. Or in your castle. I don't know, doing nothing. You have someone that works for you for everything. Anyways, so then the next day, Robert and some colleagues are watching a rugby match, and we actually see Jennings again taking photos of the event. And then Father Brennan actually finds him and tells Robert to meet him at a park the next day because his wife is in danger and he'll die if he doesn't come. Very ominous.
So how do both fucking Father Brennan and Jennings know where Robert's at all the time? I'm like, bro, are you sharing your location on your iPhone with everyone? Turn that setting off, but actually keep it on because we want to solve some problems.
You need to be safe.
You need to be safe.
And Jennings also during this time ends up taking some more photos of the priest. And we also see him going back and developing them. And we start to see that mysterious line again. So the next day, Robert actually does go and meet Father Brennan at this park, Bishop Park to be exact. And they talk about how dangerous Damien is and that in the book of Revelations, all of this has been predicted. And Father Brennan essentially tells Robert that he needs to go to the town of Megiddo in the old city of Jezreel and that he needs to talk to a man named Bugenhagen.
So many of those words do not make sense to me. I did not understand anything. And I'm like, how will Robert retain this information without email or his fucking notes app on a smartphone?
I had the same thoughts. And honestly, if you do not pay attention to this film and in these like particular parts, you're going to lose so much context because you really have to understand what's going on.
We're ramping up with the context. And I was just like, where's my notes app?
Yep. And basically, Father Brennan tells Robert that this man, Bugenhagen, is the only one that can tell him how to kill the child or how the child must die. And Robert is like, what the fuck? You are telling me basically how I need to get rid of my child. And so he's having trouble believing Father Brennan, obviously. And Father Brennan tells Robert that Kathy is actually pregnant and that Damien will definitely not let that child be born. And he also basically straight up tells Robert that Damien is the son of the devil. And Robert is like, bro, no, he's not. Leave us alone. And I don't want to see you ever again. And as Robert leaves Father Brennan, he says, you'll see me in hell, Mr. Thorne.
Why is Father Brennan trying so hard? Like, shouldn't he bounce the fuck out of there and stop trying to help and just like save yourself?
I actually think he does say earlier when he first shows up at Robert's office in the beginning of the film, he basically says the reason that he is there is because he's also trying to save himself because he basically has betrayed Christ or betrayed the Savior and he needs to save himself to make sure he can go to heaven. So he's trying to like do all this good stuff now.
Daggers.
Apparently.
Daggers, get it? You'll see. You'll understand soon, listeners.
And Father Brennan then walks deeper into the park as a storm is brewing. There's like no people out. It's just him walking and it gets super stormy very quickly.
Is it just me or is the storm like kind of like twilighty pretty?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. Loves me a storm.
Loves
However,
me a storm.
Father Brennan is like, don't loves me a storm right now. So he's trying to get out of there and he's running through this beautiful like park that's surrounded by trees, and all of a sudden a fucking tree gets like lit on fire or struck by lightning or something. And he's like, word, I gotta get out of here. And the tree branch like falls. He's like, I gotta go.
Yeah, it starts to get really sketch, and you can just tell as all of this is transpiring that he's trying to like walk or run towards like a church. And he actually tries to get to the nearest church very close by to Bishop Park, and he sees that the gates are closed, and so he inevitably climbs over the fence and into the property. And as he goes to try to get into the church and sees that the church door is also locked and he's not able to get in, as he sort of backs himself away from the building, a pole breaks off from the top of the church building and falls down and it impales him.
R.I.P. Father Brennan, sad way to go. But I'm also like, Jennings, who had the photos that they're like were ominous, he could have been a homie and been like, yo, Father, you should check out these pics and probably avoid sharp objects. Again, I'm going to say this a lot, Final fucking Destination.
I totally agree. Some of this could maybe have been avoided. But I also think Jennings also, at the time at least, did not understand what the photos meant until this death of Father Brennan. And I think that's when he really starts to put like two and two together. But then later, when Robert arrives back at home, you can tell that Kathy is super annoyed by Damien. She's sort of like sitting in their like living room area, and she asks Mrs. Baylock repeatedly to take him somewhere else to play because she basically can't take it anymore.
To be fair, Damien is being annoying as fuck, like just like playing on the pool table and being like, meh, 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 just making annoying fucking noises. I did that a lot to my husband. And then Robert comes in and Damien's like, Daddy, Daddy. They're all cute and affectionate. And I bet Catherine hates to see like that dynamic where she can't have that with her quote unquote son.
Her demon child.
Yeah.
Well, and then Kathy sort of confides in Robert, telling him that she's just been feeling super strange and that she's having a really hard time explaining it. And then Robert is like, well, if this is what the doctor is doing to you, then I should probably talk to him. And she even says, yes, you should. He actually has something that he wants to tell you. And before it goes any further than that, she then says to him, Robert, I don't ever want to have any more children. And he's kind of like, okay, like that's fine. And then she proceeds to tell him that she's pregnant and that she wants an abortion.
I think we talked about this in an earlier podcast. When was abortion legalized?
Oh, that's a great question.
I know we talked about this earlier, but in the meantime, also, how did Father Brennan know that she was pregnant? Is he a father and a psychic?
So in 1967, the Abortion Act became law, legalizing abortion under certain conditions, and it came into effect on the 27th of April in 1968.
In London.
In London, in Britain. Fun fact.
So is demon like part of that?
That is part of the special circumstances, I think, is if you have a demon child, get them out.
Yeah, cool.
And as they're like talking a little bit more, the phone actually rings. And as Robert answers, he finds that the person hung up, but they did say something before they hung up about checking the newspapers. And Robert sees on that day's like newspaper, right on the front cover, he sees Father Brennan on the front page with a picture of his struck body, which is fucking wild. Because I'm sorry, you just put a picture of the dead body struck with a freaking pole on the paper?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not okay. And I'm like, have some fucking tact, people.
Have some respect.
Have some tact. I learned that word from Scream.
Oh. And then Robert ends up talking to Catherine's doctor about how Kathy thinks that Damien is evil.
Girl, now is the time to trust your gut. Why can't you or Robert just trust your gut? Can't with these wavering thoughts.
Well, and then fucking Robert still doesn't believe the whole situation. And even the doctor tries to convince him of an abortion. And he's like, no. Which actually, upon thinking about it a little bit further, I kind of get because, okay, side note. I think Kathy wants an abortion, obviously, because she doesn't want any more children and doesn't want another children like Damien. But I think that Robert sees it almost as a positive of like, maybe if this child is born, it can somehow counteract like
second chance.
Yeah, like if Damien is potentially like the Antichrist, maybe this baby will be the opposite and be able to sort of counteract what's going on with Damien. Is at least how I was kind of like interpreting the whole thing.
I suppose, but also like her body, her choice, and with all of the shit going on, maybe right now is not the best time.
100%. I just wanted to throw that tidbit in there of why they might be at odds.
No,
with
and
their
I completely agree with you, but like maybe now is not the time.
Yeah. Well, and it's all not going to matter in a few seconds because now we're getting into our next scene, which is very, very pivotal in the film. And basically, Robert is gone and Kathy's at the house with Mrs. Baylock and Damien. And Kathy is in their upstairs area where they have like an open banister that kind of goes all the way around sort of like the open section of their hallway. How do you like describe that?
Think about the sound of music when they're like, it's a foyer. Am I right? A foyer?
Well, foyers are usually on the bottom level, like right when you enter a home. It's kind of like the entrance area.
The banisters around the foyer.
Around the foyer. Yeah.
Around the massive ass fucking foyer.
Yep. But then as she's like kind of near the banister doing this like housework sort of, and she's on like a stool or table of some sort, Damien is riding around on his bike with Mrs. Baylock in kind of a back room. And Mrs. Baylock lets him ride off into the hallway where Catherine is.
And Mrs. Baylock be looking all kinds of evil. And I'm like, are you influencing him to do all of this shit?
1000%. I think that she is like basically like, go boy.
She's like, this is your time.
Well, and then Damien on his little bike, he bumps into Kathy's table or stool or whatever she's standing on. And we see immediately falling over the banister, we see like a fishbowl, and the fishbowl hits the ground. And I have a little fun fact about this, that when this like fishbowl falls to the ground, there's actually dead sardines that come out of the broken glass, and they were painted orange for this film.
Literally to ask, did they fucking paint them orange? Because that's disgusting.
They were used in place of actual goldfish because director Richard Donner refused to kill goldfish for the sake of making a movie, which I love.
I love that, but also like, what the fuck?
I know. Well, Kathy, she actually ended up falling over the banister as well, but caught herself kind of on the inner end. And she's able to barely hang on as she's about to fall.
But homegirl, she be holding on like way longer than I could have. Like she's been doing her arm day like routine on point.
I think she's doing Pilates.
I love Pilates. Except for I don't do them, but like I love them.
I don't do the Pilates, but
I love them.
I love them.
And while she's hanging onto this banister, Damien's just like bending down, staring at her. And she's screaming, Damien, no, no.
And she ends up falling in the most epic fall scene. As she falls, it's like slow-mo, and we see the entire thing. There's not a cutaway. There is no weird fancy effects, at least from what we can tell as the viewer. It looks so cool, and she hits the ground with this like, just, I don't know, just this intense kind of like thump. And it almost reminds me of when Derry falls down the pipe in Jeepers Creepers in our previous episode right before this, if you guys want to listen. And we talk about how when he falls down the pipe, he also has this kind of slow fall and we see him thump on the ground.
If you had an inkling that your kid is probably evil and he's riding a bike around, maybe avoid dangerous fucking shit like standing on a chair. Like maybe we don't do that.
And then later, when Robert is arriving at the hospital to see how Kathy is doing, there is a ton of press trying to talk to him. The doctor tells him, thank God, that she will recover, but that she has a concussion, she has a broken humerus, and she's definitely having some internal bleeding. And Robert, after hearing the internal bleeding part, is definitely very concerned. And the doctor tells him that she is no longer pregnant.
Again, I keep saying this, but trust your fucking intuitions. How is this not adding up yet?
The fact that your wife even had a child in her belly is probably what made Damien act even faster, maybe, than he would have to try to kill her.
Totally.
Just putting that out there.
Oh, wow, a jealous little boy.
Jealous. And the doctor also tells Robert, I love this little line. He says, well, with proper care, she can still have children. And in my head, I'm like, bro, that's the furthest thing that they're thinking about right now. And so Robert actually goes to Kathy's bedside and she says to him in her like small little injured voice, don't let him kill me.
Literally, like, please don't let him kill me. And he's just petting her saying, Kathy, 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 it's going to be all right. Bro, no, we got to go see the Babadook in Jezebel City and figure out how to kill this little fucker.
Fuck yeah, we do.
Again, if you don't have your notes app, then how are you going to remember these things?
Obviously, Babadook. And then now we're back at home and Robert is like coming back to kind of check on Damien as he's sleeping. And he actually notices that the dog is back and he is by the window growling at him.
Again, we need to fucking fire Miss Baylock because she didn't get rid of the dog. Like,
she ain't listening.
Mm-mm.
And then the phone starts ringing and Jennings is on the phone and he kind of officially introduces himself because as we've talked about, he's sort of just everywhere where Robert is, but they haven't really had a formal introduction. And so he introduces himself and asks if Robert can actually meet with him at his flat. And Robert goes to meet with him and he wants to talk about mostly like the death of the priest. So when Robert goes to meet Jennings, Jennings shows him some of the photos that he's been taking and that he's developed. And the weird coincidence with the photos kind of showing almost like how Father Brennan died.
And in the photo, it looks like a beam or a pole going through his body.
It's so spooky. Then he also shows Robert photos that he took of Damien's first nanny at his birthday party and how there seemed to be a noose around her neck. And then we all know what happened to her.
Specifically, this is so Final Destination 3 coded. Props to Jennings for being so observant. I would have looked at these pictures and been like, oh, I'm so good at taking pictures of people. Or I would have just been looking at myself and being like, okay, we can do this better with our poses next time. Instagram's a hard place, you guys.
Lots to think about. And Jennings said that he actually started digging into Father Brennan's past and found out that the priest was actually riddled with cancer and that he knew that he was dying.
And I'm like, maybe that's why he was so adamant to help rid the world of Damien and put his own life in danger because he knew he was like on borrowed time.
Absolutely. And I think like because he knew he was about to die, I think there's that part of just like wanting to do good kind of before you go
to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Jennings also said that the coroner found in the inside of Father Brennan's right thigh a scar or a birthmark, so to speak, that said 666. So then Robert and Jennings actually end up somehow getting into Father Brennan's living quarters, and they notice that there are thousands of Bible verses all over the walls, even covering the windows, and that very particularly there are 47 crosses hung behind the door, almost like he was trying to keep something out.
And Jennings says that the police thought that Father Brennan was insane, so they were like, we don't give a fuck, here are the keys, go wild. And Jennings then actually found his diary.
And the diary actually is not really about Father Brennan. It has a bunch of entries pretty much just about Robert and all of his whereabouts.
Okay. It's like having a day planner, but dedicated to somebody else. And I love a day planner, so that's amazing. And also, when I die, please burn all of my diaries. And you heard it here first.
Do you still have diaries? I mean, I know you used to journal a lot, but do you still journal?
Yes.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Burn them all.
I'll burn them. And the last entry actually in his diary said that he met with Robert in Bishop's Park, which is, as you know, right before he died.
Probable cause, not good for Robert. I've been watching too much Dateline.
And then he also had some articles about the Star of Bethlehem and how it was striking again and how it actually happened to coincide with Damien's birth.
And Jennings actually deduces beyond that Damien was probably born on the 6th day of the 6th month at 6 a.m. And I'm like, okay, Detective Daddy, you're doing extra. I'll give you all the money. Like, let's go.
Robert then actually tells Jennings that he's actually not sure whose son he's actually raising because his actual birth son died. And Jennings is very quick to offer his help. And he's like, it's all good. Let's find out together who this person is that you are raising. Because Jennings actually happened to capture a picture of himself in a mirror in Father Brennan's quarters or apartment or whatever. And it kind of is also predicting his own death, which is going to come into play a little bit later on in the film.
Totally. He's like, yeah, bro, it is my problem. I need to help you because it's going to help me. And I'm just confused by that. Like, because like, did we see him lock eyes with Damien or Baylock or the dog? Do we miss that?
I feel like Damien is maybe just wreaking havoc on anyone that might be looking a little bit too close into him.
Yeah, or like a threat to him. Totally.
Exactly. So then back at the hospital, Robert actually moves Kathy into a very special room to try to make sure that she's safe. And Robert then goes back home and is looking for Mrs. Horton, who is actually a woman that sort of runs like the entire household. She's not like just the nanny or anything, but not just Mrs. Horton, but none of their housing staff are there. And Robert only finds Mrs. Baylock.
Robert, open your eyes and your ears. What the fuck?
Well, I think he is starting to finally get it, like especially putting Kathy into more protective quarters, like in the hospital. Like I think he knows like some shit could go down, but yeah, he's still not fully like believing it.
He's not fully getting it.
No. And Mrs. Baylock is like, well, I can manage everything, including taking care of Damien. It's like, oh, no, you're sketch.
She also is like, yeah, we sent the dog away this morning. No, you didn't, bitch. I know this. Even though we don't see it, I know this. And we also don't see Damien in the scene for a while. And I was like, that's so weird.
The whole thing is sus for sure. But after Robert, I guess, pretty much thinks that Damien is safe with Mrs. Baylock and that he doesn't need to worry about it, Jennings and Robert actually go to Italy to investigate Damien's birth story. And as they kind of pull up to the hospital where Damien was born and where Robert's son passed away, they find out that 5 years ago, the hospital that he was born in actually burned down and that the one that they're at currently is a new hospital that was built in place of it.
So many red flags. How many red flags do we need? Come on, people. And I love how that before Robert goes into the hospital with Jennings, who's like running for his life to go find everything he can so he can save his own life, Robert's just like, yeah, I could take a good cigarette right outside this hospital that burned down a couple of years ago.
It's so funny. It's so weird. But they end up going inside the new hospital and they try to find any records that they can of Damien's adoption, Damien's birth, anything that they could find between like Damien and the little boy that actually was Robert's real son. And they're actually met with a little bit of resistance because the nurses there are just like, there were no adoptions. Like, we have no record of anything that you're even talking about.
And Jennings actually comes back and says, I talked to somebody and they said all the records of anybody who ever came through this hospital burned in the fire.
And then one of the nurses actually says that Father Spoleto, who was the father around the night that Damien was given to Robert and the night that Robert's son died, that Father Spoleto is actually still alive and that he's in another part of Italy. And so Jennings and Robert make it their mission to find him.
How do I get on this Italian vacay? Sign me up.
Right. I know. At first I was like, how did they get to Italy so fast? But then I remembered that from London to Italy actually isn't that far once you're already in Europe.
Wouldn't that be nice?
I know. And while driving, Jennings actually finds this like quote unquote Bible verse that Father Brennan said to Robert before he died when they were meeting in Bishop Park. And it talks all about the birth of the Antichrist, the devil's child. And it says, the devil's child will rise from a world of politics. And I want to make a note here too that half of this Bible verse is actually not real. It was made up for the movie. And I thought that was super interesting because upon watching the film, I was like, oh shit, do I remember this Bible verse? Because I actually went to church quite a lot as a child.
But based on that fictional Bible verse, we know that Robert is a politician. So that's super fucking problematic. And I also love how they're discussing all of this at a cute little cafe, just like they stop for a casual cappuccino, casual cap.
But it's like so cute, casual cap.
Just like amidst all these fucking situations and priorities, where are they?
Well, and then Robert and Jennings actually find where Father Spoleto now lives. And they find that he's like very ill looking and he's still got some burns and pretty bad scarring from that fire.
I also want to know what Jennings' actual job title is. Like, is he a photographer? Is he a PI? Can I see his LinkedIn page?
I'm pretty sure he's all of those things after this film. So one of the other priests actually tells them that Father Spoleto has been working on his penance for abandoning Christ, quote unquote. And he also tells them that for everything holy, there is something unholy.
And Robert asks why Spoleto has fallen from such grace. And the other priest says that he can't speak, but here's how we know he's abandoned Christ. And then they lead them both to something that Spoleto wrote on the floor, and that is 666. The priest explains the meaning of 666 is that they are the devil, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. And just like this other priest, I don't think we actually get his name, but for everything holy, there's something unholy. And Jennings automatically understands that means on the other side of that is the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. So I'm like, Jennings, you smart as fuck.
Dude, yeah. Making lots of connections here.
Yeah.
Well, and then Robert and Jennings actually get to talk to Father Spoleto about Damien. And they're just trying to ask, like, where did Damien come from?
And Robert reminds Spoleto that he said when he first fucking embezzled a baby from him that he knew Damien's mother.
And Spoleto starts writing the word Servet or Servetti, which is an old cemetery about 50 kilometers north of Rome. And the other priest that's kind of been helping them and sort of translating for Spoleto tells them there's really not a lot there. It's just sort of like an abandoned cemetery.
And then obviously our homies, Robert and Jennings, go to said cemetery, like love.
I would go.
Me too. Because at first I'm like, it's cute, it's hocus pocus. And then it suddenly turns into like a more moody, like Army of Darkness situation.
I totally thought it was giving Army of Darkness.
Right?
100. Oh my God. I can't wait until we do that film.
Same.
Oh my gosh. So good. Anyways. So then Jennings and Robert actually end up finding the grave of Damien's mother, the jackal, if you remember from kind of the top of the episode. And the name on the tombstone is Maria Sciani. And this actually means in Greek, Mary of Shadow. And it says that she died on June 6th.
Mind you, they're also doing this in the fucking dark and they've never been here and they don't have a flashlight. I'm like, good for you for not being night blind like me.
They're just guided by the moonlight, you know?
Oh, that's cute.
And then they also find what they potentially believe to maybe be Robert's actual child. Robert is sort of having this internal struggle, I feel like, where he is wondering if this grave next to Damien's mother that is supposed to be like a child, because it's called, I think on the tombstone, the name is Bambino Sciani, which is like such a cute little name. They're like, if there is also an animal skeleton, then maybe there's a chance that his son is actually alive somewhere. But then when they do take off the tombstone to see what's underneath Bambino's grave, they do find his actual child's skeleton.
But once they see that the remains of a child are actually in that tiny little coffin tomb mausoleum in the ground, Jennings is like, bro, let's bounce. And I'm like, yes, my dude.
Well, and then so Robert is like convinced that they murdered his son. So there's also some unknowns there during this like whole scene because it's not very clear how Robert's son actually died, right? Like, so in the very beginning of the movie, it's implied that it was like a stillborn, but I think in his mind, he is like convinced that his child was actually murdered in this hospital so that they could give Damien to him so that the trade-off kind of like made sense. And as they're about to leave the cemetery, they're actually confronted by several Rotties that end up attacking them.
And I read that Rottweilers can actually symbolize protection, and they're the oldest surviving dog breed that dates back to the Roman times.
Ooh, that's a fun fact.
Yeah. So they're protecting fucking something. So Robert and Jennings are trying to fucking bounce out because these Rottweilers are coming after them. And Robert jumps the fence and like impales part of his forearm on the fence and he can't get down.
Yeah, scary.
Scary. But then fucking Jennings is a homie and helps him down and they escape.
Back at their hotel, Robert calls Kathy and tells her that she needs to leave London immediately and that she's basically in a lot of danger. And she's like, Kathy, I just need you to agree and just do what I say. And I'm going to send like an escort from the embassy to come and get you and bring you here to Rome to me. And she agrees. And she's like, okay, I can't really move very well. I mean, she's like almost in a full body cast.
Literally. And like she's in that situation where she can barely hold her arm up because the cast is like not letting her hold her arm up. I'm like,
and she's like, you know what? Okay, cool. She's like, I will start getting ready now. As she gets up and tries to get ready, she's trying to kind of pull her gown over the back of her head. And we see Mrs. Baylock actually come into her room. And we have this epic scene where they kind of lock eyes and Kathy is confronted by her. And then down on the ground, we see an ambulance kind of pull in to the hospital area. And we see Kathy fall out of the window and she falls right into the top of the ambulance, falls onto a gurney. And then we get a scene of her like dead laying on the gurney.
I want to know what kind of fucking material that ambulance is made of.
I'm like, she just fell through that so quick.
That was, yeah.
At first when I saw it, I was like, damn, it's going to break her fall. Like she'll maybe be okay.
No,
like
she
she'll
probably
have like
would've-
more broken bones, but maybe she'll be okay.
She probably would have died still, but like, how the fuck did she get through that?
Yeah.
Before all this happened, why are none of the fucking nurses checking in on her? Like, I know it's nighttime, but she's mostly like on an IV drip and they could probably tell when she's getting out of bed. I'm not a nurse, so don't come for me, but I was like, why is nobody checking on her? RIP. Also, shout out to my love, my lady, my favorite nurse, Cassidy Sossaman Puckett.
We love Cassidy.
We love you.
Shout out to you, boo boo. Thank you for all you do.
Yes.
And unfortunately, Robert, shortly after he was just talking to Kathy about getting her ready to come to Rome, he gets the call that she has died and he is beside himself. And Jennings is not with him at the moment. So he has this moment of just like sobbing into his pillows about the news that he just got about Kathy being gone. And
piggybacking off of that, I'm like not victim blaming, but you did steal a fucking demon child and that led to all of this shit. But I'm also sorry, my dude.
We're so sorry, my dude.
Yep.
Jennings actually ends up coming back into their room and tells Robert that he found out about where the town of Megiddo is and how it actually means Armageddon and how right now it's like an old excavation site, but they can go there because there's a crew, including that, what is his name? Bugenhagen man.
Yeah.
How Bugenhagen is also there and they can go and see him. And Robert tells Jennings about how Kathy is dead. And he says to Jennings, in quotes, I want Damien to die too.
I mean, dramatic, but like, good for you for thinking that. Could we have done this sooner? Up top at the movie, so it was a little bit shorter of the film.
Absolutely. So then Jennings and Robert make their way to the town of Megiddo. And the site for the town of Megiddo was actually an archaeological dig. And it's a real dig, fun fact. And it's just not in Megiddo in real life. So it's actually located in real life in the old city of Jerusalem on the southern end of the Temple Mount. And as Jennings and Robert make their way there, they actually go and meet a man named Bugenhagen, who Father Brennan told them he needed to find in this like town of Jezreel.
Bugenhagen is like, yo, this is where Christianity was born. And he asks if the little priest was dead yet. And both Jennings and Robert were like, yeah, bummer. And then the camera turns to him and he looks like fucking Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting with his cute little cardigan. And I'm so here for it.
He looks so out of place with like what you're picturing this like archaeological man to look like. I totally agree. Well, and then Bugenhagen tells Robert that they must get to work. And that Jennings actually needs to leave because they need to be alone.
He's super understanding and he
so
leaves.
Understanding.
I would be like, bitch, I came all this fucking way. Just kidding. I'm a pushover. But he should be like, bitch, I came all this way to help you. And I hope Jennings is invoicing Robert for the research and travel, please. Also, I would not be wandering around this little archaeological town if I had a Final Destination 3 photo of my death.
Absolutely. But playing devil's advocate, What else would you do? Just sit at home and wait to die? Or would you maybe try to figure out how to kill this demon child so that maybe the whole thing can be over?
I mean, yes, but like, help me help you.
Well, so then Bugenhagen says that it must be done on hallowed ground. And he says that Damien's blood must be spilled on the altar of God or at a church. And Bugenhagen gives Robert these like very special daggers that I don't remember if we get like a lot of detail of like where they came from. But he basically says that he needs to use these to kill Damien. And Bugenhagen tells him that if he wants proof that Damien is like this child of the devil and that he needs to be killed, that he should have the birthmark 666 somewhere on him that will prove that he is the child of the devil.
Okay, bro. After 5 years of like bathing him and knowing him, would I not have fucking seen that?
Yeah, he basically says like, I've bathed this child. I haven't seen it.
And...
Bugenhagen.
Okay, thank you. I was struggling there. Bugenhagen is like, if you can't see it, it's probably on his scalp, bro. So shave that head or cut his hair. But I'm like, but babies aren't born with like that much hair, and they probably could have seen it.
Au contraire, some of them are. Actually, it's an old wives' tale that if you have a lot of heartburn during pregnancy, that your baby's gonna have a lot of hair.
Pray for heartburn.
Oh, because you want hair? Dude, I was bald as fuck until I was like 2. I don't think my mom had any. She had like opposite heartburn. She had heart cool.
Nah, you got hair, girl. You got
now
hair.
I do. It took a while.
So basically, the solution is we need Robert to like basically fucking shave Damien's head or look on his scalp and figure it out.
Well, and then Bugenhagen also warns Robert that he needs to be really careful with Mrs. Baylock because he calls her an apostle of hell.
But I looked it up and I was like, what is an apostle from hell? And it's an actual thing. Basically, it's someone who is either in hell or will probably go to hell for eternal punishment.
Like she knows she's going to go to hell. So it's like, I might as well help the devil.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, and then after meeting with Bugenhagen, Robert and Jennings are now back walking through a more crowded town together. And Jennings is like demanding to know what Bugenhagen said to Robert. Because if you remember, Jennings was kind of dismissed throughout that part of the conversation. And Robert isn't really telling him fully what's going on.
He wants to know the tea. His life's on the line too. So fucking tell him the tea.
Well, and Robert tells him that basically he's like, I'm supposed to kill Damien, but that he can't really bring himself to even think about that and how he needs to kill a child. He basically says, I cannot be responsible for the murder of a child.
Brother, you literally just said, I want to kill Damien.
Whiplash.
Whiplash. I can't handle it. I'm going to send you my fucking hospital bill for whiplash.
As you should.
Thank you.
And in a fit of frustration, Robert actually throws these daggers that were given to him by Bugenhagen. And as Jennings actually goes to try to go pick them up, because he's like, bro, like, I guess if you won't do it, like, I fucking will. Like, I came all the way to fucking Jazreel to make sure that I don't die. Because remember, I can see in these photos that, like, I might die soon. And as he's like getting these daggers and picking them up from this kind of random little, like, almost construction site looking area.
Yeah.
I don't know. A truck actually ends up rolling backwards towards Jennings and it ejects a sheet of glass from the back part of the truck bed. And this glass is aimed at his neck and it decapitates him in the most epic scene ever. And I know I said that earlier about Catherine falling through the window into the ambulance, but this like tops it 100% for me.
Okay, Final Destination 2.
Well, and this pretty much also gives Robert the proof that he needed that the killing needs to be done. Like now your fucking friend in all of this and the one person that you had that supported all of your theories is dead and decapitated.
So he's hopefully got that in his mind. And then we catch a scene of Robert casually flying back home on a plane with a fucking dagger on his lap. Okay, airport security, where were you?
I don't even think TSA was a thing back then.
But no, I looked and it started in the 1970s. To a different extent, I'm sure, but like a fucking dagger.
Were they like, oh yeah, I mean, Italy, daggers, that makes sense. Like get on this plane.
Totally.
Go ahead. Like you're the U.S. ambassador. Makes sense that you need daggers.
He's flying commercial, bro.
We have a lot of questions. Someone could help us answer these, please. Now Robert is back in London and he sort of like starts to devise this plan to kill Damien. But he knows that he kind of needs to like get rid of the things in the way, right? So like there is this dog that keeps fucking showing up even though he's tried to get rid of it. And then there's also Mrs. Baylock. And as he's like entering in the home, it's very late at night when he comes home and he actually lures the dog into an open door to the basement and then shuts him in. So smart.
It's smart, but I feel like this dog has way more intuition than to fucking fall for this little trick. But here we are.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do, you know?
Yeah.
And then Robert goes to Damien's room and his first initial thing is not like, I'm going to just immediately grab Damien and kill him. But he's like, I'm going to double check that motherfucker's scalp and see if he does have that 666. And so as he's sleeping, Robert actually ends up grabbing a pair of scissors from Kathy and his bedroom. And he starts looking at Damien's hair and scalp to see if he has this 666 mark. And he cuts away a little bit of Damien's hair that totally reveals that he does have the mark. And now Robert has everything. Like the proof is in the pudding that Damien is not a real human child. He is the son of the devil. He's got the mark. All these things have happened. He has all of the signs pointing to, yes, demon. Yes, yes, yes.
He's realized this, which is a pivotal point, and out of fucking nowhere, Mrs. fucking Baylock jumps on his back and like starts biting him. I also like her
pajamas.
Her green pajamas.
So you know what's funny is in the scene when she jumps on his back, they look green, but then later down
they look blue.
In the kitchen, they're blue.
So, but if anybody like needs to get me a Christmas gift, I like her green or blue pajamas.
Noted.
But anyways, so she's like fucking attacking Robert on his back. And I was like, why did this remind me of Hereditary?
Actually, yeah, you're totally right. Ugh, Hereditary. Scary. Robert also manages to get her off of him and he kind of like bashes her sort of like against like a part of the wall and she kind of like passes out like momentarily and he's able to grab Damien and tries to take him out of the house. And as him and Damien are going down the stairs, Damien actually grabs like a lighting fixture. It seems like it's like electrocuting them both and they both fall down the stairs, but then Robert is able to like get up.
And he like starts dragging Damien's slightly electrocuted body like down the stairs.
Damien is like unconscious and it's hilarious. He's just dragging this little
literally
body.
just with one arm drag.
It looks crazy. Well, and then in the kitchen, and he's like trying to get completely out of the house, Mrs. Baylock comes back and she attacks him again and jumps on Robert. But he manages to grab a couple of random things from the kitchen and is able to stab her kind of like in the neck and shoulders multiple times.
I want to know what happened to everybody, like Damien, Mrs. Baylock's, and the dog's powers. Like, why are we being weak?
I think they can only like do so much though. Like obviously, like I think that they have a lot of like influence in people's minds to make them like have certain behavior. But I think like for someone like Robert, who his mind knows what's going on, like he knows the ruse. He knows that Damien is the son of the devil. Like his mind might not be as easy to penetrate, if that makes sense.
I just think our antagonists are a little sleepy.
I think they are. They need to buck up.
Yeah, they need to buck the fuck up.
So then Robert ends up taking Damien's unconscious body into his car and drives to the church. And as he's like leaving his quarters, or like not quarters, his property, I guess, he passes a police officer. And the police officer is for sure like freaked out because he just sped past him. And it's like, bro, Robert, maybe slow down like a tiny bit so that the police don't catch on to you, because then the police are like, well, I'm going to follow this motherfucker because something weird is going on. And Robert brings Damien into the church and he's like able to bring him in. I mean, he's a little 5-year-old boy, right? And he is about to kill him.
And while this is happening, he hesitates and he waits way too long while Damien's saying, please, daddy, no.
The last final like manipulation, right?
Yeah.
And it's so crazy because literally as Robert is about to take one of the daggers and kill Damien, the police come in, aim their gun at Robert, and they're like, drop your weapon or we'll shoot. And they end up shooting. And then that is it for the scene. And then in the very next scene, we see that we are at Robert and Kathy's funeral. And we end up seeing that Damien has actually survived and he is holding the hand of 2 adults. And he gives the most evil little grin to the camera to kind of end the film. And then we actually see that he is with the president and the president's wife, alluding to potentially another film to come after this.
It was a look that could kill. Also, I bet Damien is just like how many politicians are created.
As spawns of the devil.
Kind of, yeah.
Honestly, I don't doubt that. I think that there's actually a lot of conspiracy that a lot of politicians are like evil in some form. But we'll get into that later.
Yeah. And that was The Omen, our friends. So we're going to get into some final thoughts and hot takes. I'll go first because
she's got a lot of thoughts.
I got a lot of thoughts. Mostly, you guys, you know, I'm like the bad cop. It's a classic film, and I know that, but I don't get the hype. So don't come for me if this is like your favorite horror film. Like, it was fine. But I did appreciate the fact that they intentionally made it not like The Exorcist, where it's like a girl with
so obvious
that she's being possessed and spitting up green vomit or whatever she's doing, like her head's turning around. It was just like a little bit more ominous because it's just this like little kid and we don't know what it's like more psychologically terrifying. And I do appreciate that fact about it, but just not my favorite.
I loved it. So on the opposite spectrum, but I loved the really, really close tie between like good and evil. And I mean that it wasn't super obvious throughout even almost the entire film that Damien was like outrightly evil, right? So just like Ali said, with The Exorcist, it's so obvious that she is possessed by the devil and all of these things are happening because of that. Where this film, I felt like had so much more of a deeper internal struggle between the family of the Thorns, of Robert Thorne, Catherine Thorne, and Damien Thorne.
You mean they had a thorn in their side?
They did. They sure did. And I just felt like I tried to put myself in their shoes, and like as parents who have literally held this baby and raised this baby since he was an infant, and they have clearly had good times with him, they probably had a lot of struggle to come to the thought that he actually is the devil's son and that he is not a human child. And I think that's like kind of like the whole point of the film, right? But I really loved it. I actually forgot about this film for a long time. I saw it a long time ago when I was really young, and seeing it again, I really loved it. I watched it multiple times with producer. We both loved it. I also thought that Damien was perfect mix of like cute and creepy. I feel like they did a really, really good job of not making him really sway one way or the other too far, because it really kept, again, with that, like you're having the internal struggle as the viewer of like, damn, like, do we believe that like we should kill Damien or like, do we not?
Is he evil?
Yeah. Like you literally question yourself throughout the entire time, which I love. And I think that that was totally Richard Donner's whole thing with this film. And that was like what he wanted to happen with the audience and what they were feeling. I also thought that all of Kathy's outfits were fire. So,
girl, she is fire. Her outfits are fire. I'm obsessed.
And then, Als, did you find this scary?
I did not at all. My bad. But I thought the scariest things were the fucking clowns at that fucking birthday party up top.
Agreed.
And the other thing I thought was very scary is the amount of money Robert and Jennings must have paid for the airfare to go to all those fucking places.
Like so scary, it's probably so cheap.
No.
Oh.
No.
Oh, okay. Oh.
I feel like it was expensive.
Oh, interesting. Okay, let's dive into that after this.
Yeah, for sure. Ryanair wasn't a thing, girl.
That's true. You're right. You're right. Actually did find this a little bit scary, and I almost lied for a hot second to say that it wasn't scary, but then I knew that the producer would 100% call me out, because I think I was watching it the other night and I told him that he needed to come into our bedroom together to watch it with me because I was scared to watch it alone in the dark. So,
what scene was the catalyst for that?
I have such a fear of like possession or the devil or all those things. I think it's because I like grew up religious. So I have this like weird internal tie to that kind of like subject matter. I don't know. I don't get it, but it definitely creeps me out more than like slasher films. Like slasher films fuck me up. I don't care. Like I'm not scared at all.
You mean fuck you up and down, like in a good way.
Literally. But like give me a movie where someone's possessed and I'm fucking scared. I don't know if that's just me.
And that's the contrast there is I did not grow up religious.
There you go.
But what was your favorite scene?
Okay, this was so hard for me because I have several, but I think my favorite scene was when Jennings' head got decapitated. It was just so... I'm sorry. I don't like love it. Like, oh my God, it was so cool. Like, that's so sad. I mean, I love Jennings, but also it was so well done and so cool. And I like for the time for 1976, I'm like, damn, I love that. I love a practical effect. Mm-hmm. You could tell like that was not CGI. That was not like computer generated, nothing about it. Right. So I loved it. I'm sorry. I'm a little wine drunk right now, so I'm hitting the microphone. But, it's at the end of the episode. Anyways, Allie, what was your favorite scene?
I don't know if I have like a necessarily favorite scene, but after talking about like the creepy and cute of it all, I think at the very end when it's a very end shot where he's with the president and the maid of honor. What's her name? First lady?
The maid of honor.
You guys. It's like 9:30 here. I'm tired. The president.
You act like that's so late. It's like 9:30 here.
We're in our 30s.
The first lady.
The first lady and the president, and he's just holding their hands and he just turns his face and he's kind of scowling. And then it all of a sudden turns into like a grin like the Grinch does. As someone with resting bitch face, please tell me how to do this.
It's just so good. Actually, a fun fact about that, Als, is the producer actually told me that when he was doing some research on this film, he found that the way that they achieved that like kind of little grin at the end is that the director, Richard Donner, basically was taunting little Damien or Harvey and was basically saying, don't you laugh, don't you do it, don't you dare. And that's kind of how he got this cute little like smirky grin that was like kind of on the border of laughing and not laughing, essentially.
I love that.
Our last fun fact for the day.
I love that tactic.
Well, that kind of wraps everything for the episode. We love you all so much. Thank you for listening to another episode of Spooky Chicks and Horror Flicks. And as a reminder, you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Spooky Chicks and Horror Flicks. And if you love the podcast, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen. And we really appreciate if you love the podcast. Tell a friend that you love us, whatever it is that you can do to just kind of like share the love of the podcast. We love you all. And yeah, we will see you next time. Allie, you want to send us off?
I'll send you the fuck off, you guys.
Okay, shoot.
Happy 6th day of the 6th month of a year. Don't steal a fucking random baby because you never know if they're demonic. And stay spooky fuckers.